Welcome back to another episode of Profitable Publishing. Today we're going to be talking about 5 mistakes that I see self-published or indie authors make. Now, this might not be in any particular order, however, they are all impactful and all important. And so if you are new to the podcast, I am Ashley. I am your host, and I am a self-published author, a book marketing strategist, and self-publishing consultant who supports coaches, consultants, speakers, and service providers to package your expertise into a profitable book. And I've been self-publishing for about 5 to 6 years. I have a background in literacy, and so this is from a collection of groups that I am a moderator for, clients that I've worked with to help them self-publish their books, and everything in between. Now, once again, these are not in any particular order, but the one that I see that I would like to just kind of reach out and proverbially touch self-published and indie authors on the shoulder with is the fact that you think that you have to follow all of the rules of traditional publishing. I do think that because a lot of indie publishing is structured based upon being the opposite of traditional publishing. And when I say traditional publishing, I mean where you're getting a book deal where a company is paying you in advance to publish a book. So I find that because a lot of self-published authors or indie published authors thought they were going to do traditional publishing, or they are thinking that they have to do self-publishing or indie publishing as the opposite of traditional publishing, they still feel like they have to copy a framework or copy a structure that is given to them from traditional publishing. And honestly, a lot of that you don't have to do. You can create your own adventure. I don't know if you all remember those books from when you were in elementary school, but you can create your own adventure. You can decide the strategies that work for you. You can decide the release cadence that works for you. You can pretty much break the rules within reason, of course. There are certain things within publishing you want to stay within the parameters. You want to make sure that you are in alignment with different books that you're not necessarily competing with, because I don't believe in competition in publishing because readers read multiple books at the same time. However, you of course want to feel as if you are a part of the genre, so that you're not feeling as if your book is completely coming out of left field. At the same time, there are certain things that you don't have to follow. I find a lot of authors are like, is it okay if I do this, or can I do that? And honestly, you can do whatever you want to do. However, what you should do should align with what your goals are. And so if you're here, that means that you likely have a business, you're likely a speaker, you're a coach, a consultant, and your book is going to be something that ties to your overall brand. It's something you want to use to generate leads, to bring in customers, clients, things of that sort. So the way in which you operate doesn't always mirror what you might see in traditional publishing. You may be more likely to want to include additional bonuses that are tied to your other offers that you have outside of your book. You might feel as if you are more so a part-time author as opposed to somebody who considers author being your primary title. You probably are multi-hyphenate, meaning that you have your main title that you approach your clients with or potential clients with. Then maybe you have a secondary title, and then author is somewhere in the mix within that. And when you're looking at this advice from traditional publishing, those folks often are people who are considered to be authors first. Now, of course, we have celebrities, and of course, we have people who do really well in their industries and they get signed to a traditional publishing deal, and that's fine too. It doesn't mean that everything that's in the traditionally publishing space is something that you need to follow. And so I like the way that Jody Branton says this, and she is the author of Write, Publish, Market, and she actually just released a revised version not too long ago, but she's a great resource to support authors who are business owners as well. And she likes to call it putting on your author hat. You are someone who serves your clients, you serve them well, you have different aspects within your business that you're focused on, but then at some point, you want to put on your author hat, you want to tap into that expertise to be able to position yourself in that way. And so you're not necessarily someone who's going to introduce yourself as an author first. However, you are still an author. You still have the ability to call yourself an author because you are an author. However, that might not be how you predominantly introduce yourself. That might be a supplemental aspect. That means that the advice that you're hearing, the things that you're listening to, the way that you structure your launch, the way that you are supporting your people goes beyond just buying your book. Buying your book is really just the entryway into your funnel, the entryway into your ecosystem. Or it could be the way in which you support clients that are already inside of your programs. It's not just, oh, you bought my book and that's done. That's really the beginning of their customer journey with you, or it's something that they're already in their customer journey with you, and this is going to help them to get to a deeper level. So for example, one of the things I do is I include a copy of my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-Orders, inside of my group coaching program for those who sign up, or for those who do a VIP day with me for my pre-order profit program, because the book is going to help them to be able to have better results. It's going to help them to be able to understand the framework that I provide and the processes I go through, because now they have already had the ability to kind of grab onto it, as opposed to having to wait until they get to the end of the program to get the full picture or to see that full transformation. They can get kind of a sneak peek and also read it in a different way than going through a course or going through a program that's weeks and weeks and weeks. They can process that in a bite-sized version, maybe not bite-sized because the book's pretty hefty, but they can process it in a different way, and it just helps to really supplement things. I have a curriculum and instruction background, and so one of the things about learning is that when you're able to understand something, or when you're able to receive information more than one way, it helps you to better process it. And so that's exactly what your book does. Yes, you have your videos on social media. Yes, you have your events. Yes, you have your programs, etc. However, your book provides another modality for someone to be able to tap into. And that describes you as an author. And so that's not always the case for every traditionally published author. However, it is something that's the case for you. Now, going back to the concept that you, of course, want to stay within reason of your genre, of the category that you're aiming for. If you're wanting to get some success there, you want your book to look and feel as if it belongs in the genre, but you don't want it to look and feel like it's every other book that's in that genre. So you want it to stand out in a positive way, but also feel like it belongs. So I like to kind of equate it to, for example, if you're doing like family photos, you have the option of being like matchy, where everybody has like the exact same shirt. So think about like your family reunion. Everybody has the same shirt on, same color. It's a uniform look, because maybe you want to be able to spot people from across the way or whatever. Maybe if you're going on a cruise, you have matching shirts because you want to be able to say, oh, hey, that's somebody from my group. That's one way. However, when it comes to your book, you want to look like you go together. You want to look coordinated. You don't have to necessarily look exactly the same as every other book in that genre. However, you want to look and feel as if you still belong. So going back to our like matching color coding thing, maybe you are having complementary colors. So maybe you guys are all wearing pastels. Maybe you are wearing neon colors, whatever the case may be. So that's the approach I like to take when it comes to still feeling like it's cohesive, like your book is a cohesive part of the current conversation. However, it brings a new element to it. With that, also, you get to choose your destiny. You get to choose your path. You get to choose how you want your book to support your readers, because at the end of the day, that is your goal. You're supporting your readers with some type of transformation to help them see things differently, to help them to understand that they maybe can't do their process alone. Not that you were the only answer, however, that you were the best fit for them. And sometimes that's not going to be the case with traditional publishing. And so just be mindful that you don't always have to follow all of the rules to a T from traditional publishing. All right, the second mistake is that assuming you have to wait until your book is fully finished or that it's fully out and physically in your hand to start your marketing. And this one is one that I see so often, and I hear on the interwebs that, well, I can't market my book. I can't start selling my book because I don't have the cover done, or I don't have XYZ done. And at the end of the day, by the time you get to the point of you've written a book, you've probably read it 50 million times at this point, you have met with an editor or done some self-editing, you probably know your book pretty well. And so being able to market doesn't only mean that you are physically having it in your hand saying, buy my book. It can mean taking people behind the scenes of the process of creating your book. It can mean giving people a little bit of a taste of what's going to happen in the book, and or asking their opinion and asking their feedback. So all of that counts as marketing. All of that's part of the conversation. And if you haven't taken a chance to listen to episode 23, then I do encourage you to do that, because it really will help you to reframe your understanding of what marketing is. It's not just what happens after your book is out. And so keeping that in mind, let's roll into our next one. The third mistake that I see authors make is thinking that just because you published a book, that it's automatically going to sell. And that's not the case. I see so many authors spend all of their time and energy and their money focusing on the actual writing process that by the time it comes to their marketing or sales, they have exhausted their resources, both monetarily, physically, emotionally. They're just drained. And it's an honest mistake. It can happen to the best of us. But really be mindful that writing a book doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be successful. Creating something doesn't automatically mean it's going to sell. Just like in your business, just like in the way in which you show up for your customers, you have to do the research. You have to actually do the steps to market and sell it so they understand that this is for them, this is going to help them to get that transformation, and that you are the choice for them. You're the one that's going to support them and or help them to support themselves. And so writing your book in general is not just going to mean that it's going to sell. And it can be very disheartening that you spent all of this time, all of this energy, all of this money to get your book out of you, and then it just sits and it doesn't sell, and people don't actually see it, they don't hear it, they don't even know you wrote it. That can be super frustrating. And so that's one of the reasons I am so focused on not only profitable publishing, but also using pre-orders to pre-sell your book before it's done, because that energizes you. It gives you the momentum that you need to get over that second hurdle. Because once you've written your book, you're like, okay, whew, I spent all this time, I just fought a bear, and now you want me to go fight a lion or a tiger or whatever when it comes to your marketing. So getting paid for it during that process is helpful because now you have some additional buy-in, you have some people who are excited to read your book, and it can even cover your publishing costs, which is what I teach inside of Pre-Order Profits. And so if that's something you're interested in, then I encourage you to visit preorderprofits.com/join, and there you'll find information and details about how to sign up for that program or to even see if it's a good fit for you. Next, with this, it is also important to really consider why people buy a book. Still talking about the fact that just because you write a book, people are not necessarily going to buy it. They're not necessarily going to read it. You want your book to be something that people can't put down. You want it to be something that they read, review, and recommend over and over and over again so that it starts to sell itself. And it's really hard to do that if all of your energy is put into the writing process and or where you feel like, okay, writing is enough. I don't have to do anything else besides this. And it can be a really rude awakening if that is the thought that you have. And so really being mindful that it's important to put the same energy into marketing and selling your book as it is the energy that you put into writing your book. So just want to drive that point home because that can be something that kind of slaps authors in the face. I've seen it time and time and again. And even I've had multiple authors work with me. And this was before I included marketing inside of my packages. And this is actually why I have embedded marketing inside of my publishing packages, because people would get their book published and then they would come back and say, well, nobody bought the book. And I would say, okay, well, remember when we were talking about options, I mentioned to you that you should really add on marketing because it will affect your sales. And at that point, you were not interested in it. And so we can add it on now. But what I was finding is that authors were not inclined to know how to market their book, and then they just assume that if you build it, they will come. And that's just not the case all the time, especially if you don't have an audience, and especially if you haven't been taking time to tap into your existing audience if you do have one. Now, there are some people who can drop something in the middle of the night and people will buy it. However, the majority of us are not that. We have to spend the time and energy letting people know about our books so that way they can feel like they were brought along in the process, and also that they understand why we wrote the book and that it stands out in the sea of noise that's happening in the world today. Please, please, please remember, if you get nothing else from this episode, please remember that it is important to market your books, not only in general, but also before you release them if possible. All right, our next point, this kind of melds right into that, but the idea that pre-orders have to happen on Amazon. This is a huge mistake that I see many authors make, and it's one that to me sounds like it comes from a place of just not knowing that there's other options and or not believing that those other options are going to be beneficial to you. When it comes to hosting your pre-order on Amazon, you have a couple factors that I actually talk about in a few episodes. Going back to episode 24 gives you an alternative option of what you can do outside of Amazon. And so definitely take a listen to that. But when it comes to hosting or pre-ordering your website, you're dealing with a few issues that are kind of red flags to me. And so having to wait on your royalties because you're not going to get them from Amazon until 2 months after you release your book. So 2 months after your pre-order. So that means that when you are selling your book as a pre-order on Amazon, you're not getting paid until 60 days after your pre-order closes. So meaning if your pre-order 6 months long, you're not going to get paid until 8 months. And so for me, that just wasn't something that was going to work because I needed to have my income at the beginning because I use pre-orders to cover my publishing costs. And so I dig deeper into that into episode 24. But another red flag for me is just that the fact that you don't get customer data, meaning that you have no idea who buys your book. And so just this week, I had a client who published her book on Amazon. She signed up for publishing with us, and she was saying, well, several people told me they ordered my book this week, and I have no way of checking. And I had to say, yeah, sadly, that's correct. You have no way of checking and verifying that those people actually ordered your book. And the only thing you're going to know is that that a book was ordered, and even then you won't know until the book ships is when they calculate it on Amazon. And so there are tons of benefits to selling your book on Amazon. However, the pre-order aspect is one that's a huge drawback for me. Now, I'm not saying don't use Amazon for your publishing process. That's a totally separate area. However, just a few weeks ago, I actually saw someone who was posting on Threads, and they were saying, oh, I sold 2,500 pre-orders of my book. And I got really excited for her. That's amazing. And then in my mind, because she shared an Amazon screenshot, I thought, oh my gosh, if you would have sold those somewhere else, like particularly your site, then you would be making so much more money because of the royalty amounts and things of that sort. You'd have customer data to be able to work with those folks more directly, to retarget those folks, to do all kinds of sorts of things. And so I get people do it for different reasons, but to me, it's a mistake that you can avoid and that you can work around by hosting elsewhere outside of Amazon. So as someone who uses pre-orders to publish my books, meaning that I use those to finance my publishing, as someone who works with clients to support them to generate 4 and 5 figures in pre-order income, that is just like a gut-wrenching moment. However, I get different strokes for different folks. Now, that's also one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Profitable Publishing with Pre-orders, to really break down the strategy I use to be able to host pre-orders on your website, to be able to generate that income, and to cover your publishing costs and attract your audience. Because if you're doing all this work launching your book, why not bring folks on for the ride? So I will drop the link for that inside of the show notes as well if you're interested in grabbing a copy of that book. Now, my last mistake that I know happens outside of publishing and that many of us bring it into publishing is trying to do it all yourself. So when it comes to hiring help or thinking about even getting free support or even getting support of those that are around you, this is a huge stumbling block for professionals, especially women in general, not to generalize, but for women, often we feel like we have to do everything ourselves. And we feel like that because the world sometimes makes us feel that way, or because we feel like, well, by the time I explain everything to somebody else, I could have just done it myself. For some things, that is the case. However, when you hire qualified help, it really elevates your experience. It makes you feel less stressed, and it also helps you to have a better outcome. And so this is something I dig deeper into episodes 4 and 16. I'll put those in the show notes as well. However, a few things that can help you to come out of the spirit of I got to do everything myself is the idea that when you're delegating things, you can consider to delegate things that you don't shine at. So things that are not your expertise, things that are not your queen bee role, which is something that I got from a book by Mike Michalowicz. And so he's also the author of Profit First. And one thing he really stresses in this book is to focus on your queen bee role. So in the beehive, queen bees, their entire job is to have babies. So if they're not having babies, then the hive is going to die. And then all of the other bees' jobs are to do their job. So like you have worker bees, you have bees that go get the honey, you have bees that like mix up the honey, you have bees that probably take care of the baby. I don't know if that's true, but they take care of all the babies that are made. And so everybody has a different role. And so in your business and also in your publishing process, you want to make sure that you have those roles defined and that you have the support where you need it. Because if you're trying to do all of the things, then that means that you are going to be stretched thin and also feel as if you are overwhelmed. And when you are releasing a book on top of everything else you have going on, as a speaker, coach, consultant, service provider, especially if you're helping your clients to be able to support them to complete their projects, it can be a lot. And so hiring help is so important. Delegating properly and hiring the correct help is so important. There seems to be a spirit of DIY in the self-published and indie published author space. As someone who self-published and independently publishes my books, I still don't do everything myself. Like, I work with consultants, I hire help when I need it, I don't do my own formatting. That's one that I see people tussling with online. I don't do my own cover design. However, I am very heavily involved in the process. I have a very clear vision that I share with the team that I work with, and it's something that I think has really contributed to my success. Now, one thing I truly believe is that everybody's not good at everything. And so you can be great at your areas and then hire the help for the other things. And even if you are great at it, then sometimes that can be an area where you say, okay, I know this is something I'm really good at. So for example, Canva, like maybe you're really great at design, but the time and energy that you spend in that, unless it's just something you use as like a release or something you use as like a fun thing to do. Now, if you have a background in design, you're like, I'm going to design my book cover because it just makes sense because I want to save money there. Okay, go for it. However, just be mindful that sometimes something like that could be something where you start it and you hand it off to someone else, or maybe you have somebody begin the process and then you complete it. It doesn't have to just be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to do every single thing start to finish in this area. It could be that, okay, well, actually, I'm going to have some people come and support me, or just a person to come in and support me so that way I can still get it done. Maybe it's, and at the same time, it could be that, okay, I'm not going to spend the time and energy trying to learn this new skill because I also have to serve my clients. I have speaking events I need to attend, and I want to make sure that I'm showing up fully for them as opposed to draining all of my energy, tussling with the formatting software or something of that sort. So hopefully you all can hear my heart on that. Because there is a place and time for DIY. However, to me, it's not for every single aspect of your book. So I would say if this is something you're leaning towards, choose certain areas to explore and DIY with for your book, but then also realize that help is out there and help is also affordable. It's also something that doesn't have to be all or nothing. And lastly, remember that the people that you're hiring, if they're qualified, that they're professionals. This is something they do full time. The formatters I work with, they format full time. And so they're much less likely to make a mistake. By hiring them, I can actually look and see and say, okay, if they make a mistake, it's going to stand out to me because I have fresh eyes. I haven't spent tons of time tussling with software. I can easily see, okay, this is what it is. And I haven't looked at it so many times that in the formatted sense, I haven't looked at it so many times that I've just become oblivious to the mistake. I can easily see it. And so today we talked about 5 mistakes that indie or self-published authors make. And so the first one is thinking that you have to follow all of the rules of traditional publishing. You do not. And then the second is assuming that you should wait until your book is out to start your marketing process. The third one is assuming or thinking that if you build it, they will come. Sadly, I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And then next, number 4 is thinking that pre-orders have to happen on Amazon in order to be successful. So thanks so much for listening to today's episode. And if you need support with attracting your audience while you publish, pre-selling your book, and also generating income during that process, then I encourage you to visit the show notes to learn more about the Pre-Order Profits program, where I teach authors how to generate 4 and 5 figures of income from their pre-sales in order to cover their publishing costs. So until next time, stay profitable.